Hey everybody, my name's Matt. You're watching Broke Rednecks Prepping. Coming to you from beautiful West Texas, Spur specifically. Nestled up here in the red dirt portion of the Wild West near the Texas Panhandle. Anyway, today what we're going to talk about is actually something some people have commented on in other videos. It has to do with how you deal with neighbors in an SHTF situation. And I want to be specific here that it has to do with a true SHTF, not a natural disaster or something like that. Neighbors are probably not a major threat to you in the natural disaster sense. If there's a hurricane or tornado or something like that, you're probably going to be a lot more apt to help each other. But a lot of people really worry that if in a true grid down situation, that friends, family, neighbors, people who aren't preppers are going to become a very serious liability, which is probably true. I mean, we all have that friend or family member, or multiple of them, who know that we have certain preparations made that don't do those things themselves. They probably don't have 2-3 days of food in their house. And they're quick to say, well, I'm not worried if something happens, I'm coming to your place. There are videos ad nauseum on this topic. There's anybody who preps and has people that know it, has had people say that to them. And that's a tough topic to cover because on one hand, you want to help those around you. Most preppers aren't bad people. But on the other hand, if you have limited resources that you have built up and established, you also want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a bad situation because some of the people around you, friends, family, whatever, didn't take the time to plan for the eventual something going wrong. I mean, trust me, after natural disasters, there's always people next door who know a hurricane's coming but don't have any bottled water in the house. Or people down the street who know that your area gets certain type of flooding or weather events that are in nowhere prepared to move their stuff out. And they always need help. They always need something. And if you figure that in a longer term situation, those people are going to want to rely on the same people that helped them. And they're going to think that those people will just be the ones they run to. But if you have your own family and people to take care of, that's not always practical. So what I did is I took some time and thought about it and came up with how to deal with neighbors. The first thing we need to examine though is when we're, say, dealing with neighbors, we're not just talking about the folks that live next door. We're talking about people who know us. We're using neighbor in the biblical term, love thy neighbor. What we mean is other people. So I kind of made this a little more general. How we deal with other people, family, friends, people that live down the street, folks that just happen to walk by. And so in writing this up, I want y'all to keep that in mind. I'm not literally talking just about the people who live next door. So the first thing you want to do is be prepared informationally. And by that I mean, in an SHTF situation, you need to know who is around you. You need to actually know who your neighbors are. You need to know about your family, friends, people like that may come to you. You need to have a good idea in your head who they are to start with. Because people coming to your house isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if one of the people who's made the jokes, oh, if SHTF happens, I'm coming to your house, happens to be a general practitioner physician, probably not a bad thing. You can put those skills to work. If one of them is an excellent construction worker, probably also somebody else that you can help with. If you're friends with 15 Navy SEALs that are willing to eat your ramen noodles and beans to keep bad people out your house, well, that's something to consider too. If, however, they're the people who can't mow their own yard or move themselves out of their house or keep their own bills paid, those are people you want to avoid. But this is something you need to think about and plan for ahead of time. Now, we all have that idiot relative we'll probably take because we like their kids or something like that. Fine. If you're going to do that, you need to plan for those people ahead of time. But you need to know who lives next to you, who is noticing you, who isn't. Because those are the people who are going to be a liability because they may come to you. They also may at some point steal. If people get desperate, we can look at the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina or a whole lot of other events where looting and other things started when people didn't have what they needed. And I'm not necessarily picking on people. We had a hurricane on Dorian out there in the Atlantic, tore up the Bahamas, all kinds of looting and whatnot going on. Now, I don't fault hungry people who may have been prepared but had their homes blown down for trying to go get water or food, but it can get dangerous. So You need to know which people are going to have the mindset that that's going to be their knee-jerk reaction. You also need to know about the area you live. A lot of people criticize President Trump's response in Puerto Rico. And I have yet to see a government response to anything that was perfect. However, let's bear in mind, there's multiple pictures out there of a runway with 20,000 pallets of water on it. Each pallet, 75 to 80 cases of water. So basically, with about a 3 million population in Puerto Rico, those idiots in that local government left about, 3-4 bottles of water for every single person on the island sitting on a runway for a couple of years. Things like that, you need to have ahead in your mind. If you live in a big city, if you live in a small town, you need to have a good grasp of the people around you, their level of preparedness, their culture, their skill level, so on. Because that's going to help you prepare for how you deal with those neighbors. Like I say, if somebody comes up to me and he's like, hey, grid's down, but I'm a physician and I have all of my medical equipment and pharmaceutical drugs and everything with me. If you'll let me eat some of your beans and ramen noodles, well then, whatever. I don't know, I'll split all the stuff I barter with you. Probably not a bad idea. If he's just like, I worked at Sonic for the last 15 years and can you feed me and my family and I don't feel like doing any work, different question. I would want to know some specific things about the people around you, is so that you can come up with an idea of whether you want them around or not. One of the things is their level of preps. A lot of people are not truly preppers. My mother is not a prepper, but at any given point, she's got 6 months worth of canned goods in the pantry because she buys a bunch of stuff that none of us are ever going to eat and leaves it there. It would come in handy if we were starving, though. That's good to know. I would want to know political inclinations of people. This is not me picking on liberals per se, but we want to know if they're the type of people who are advocating, say, banning guns, or the type of people who think preppers are crazy. Because typically those are going to be the people who expect somebody else to solve their problem for them. You probably want to make friends with people who are a little more self-reliant, resilient, can problem solve on their own. As cool as it may sound, you also want to know if they have kids. People will do crazy things when they're desperate. It's more so if they have children. And that's something to file away. Their children are always going to take priority over everything else. It's not me attacking people with kids. It's just a practicality. Something you need to consider. If somebody, you can justify a lot of things if it's to make sure your kids are fed at night. And so when thinking about neighbors and friends and other people that might stop by, that is something very important to factor in. Now, another thing about dealing with neighbors, this isn't practical for everybody, but one of the things you probably want to do is have a limited number of them around you. I mean, we live in small towns in the country so that we don't have a lot of neighbors around. I like that because it limits the amount of information and intelligence you have to have on them to start with. So if you're capable of being somewhere where you're just not living in a 20-story apartment building with people stacked everywhere, if you can be out in the country or have a little bit of room, that's probably good because it means you're going to have fewer people. Because if you live in a city, New York or LA, you may not know most of your neighbors. I mean, you may walk by the same crowd of folks every day of the week. I mean, I had one guy tell me that he had 35,000 people living on his block in Queens. It's insane. Well, it's larger than the population of the town I grew up, which is about 25,000. That's a lot of folks that can notice you and see that you're not losing weight when they are. That's a lot of people that per capita, you're going to have some folks that want to target somebody because we have a portion of people out there whose natural inclination is to steal. So if you can get somewhere where there's a limited number of people around, that's probably a good thing. I'd also want to plan for a barter system. If you have plenty of food, but you don't have enough water, you may have some neighbors who have access to some water and you don't. Even if it's something like a pond on their property or something like that that you can trade, you can go out there and get some water and sterilize it or whatever. But you're going to find people are less likely to steal if you can trade something they have for something you have. And I think a good barter system with the people around you would be a very good consideration. It's not the end-all be-all, and it would be more practical for a small community. You could also trade food for some labor. I mean, trust me, if the grid goes down, there's going to be all kinds of crap that needs to be done when electrical and gas power stuff doesn't work anymore. So consider having some preps that are intended to be used for a barter system, for not necessarily giving them something for free, letting them work for it. If you have a prepper group, I'd probably compare intel on all of them. Now, I know a lot of prepper groups, you have one guy who lives here and one guy who lives there. But if you have one guy who lives in an urban area, and especially if you're all going to evac together, you probably want to evac the guy in the urban area first. That's where things are going to fall apart the most. So you also need to know which neighbor, which one of your group is going to have the highest liability neighbors and which won't. Because if you're counting on different members of the group to bring certain things that the group as a whole can use, well, you need to be able to triage and prioritize ahead of time who you bug out first. I'd also factor in charity as a part of your preps. Most of us aren't necessarily religious, but we are nice enough people. I don't think nobody's going to be able to live forever on what they have in their pantry or even their Connex out on their property. I think most of us would feel better from just a moralistic and a psychological standpoint if we could have a certain amount that is intended to be given away. We don't want to let our neighbors and people that were our coworkers and friends starve. So if we can give them a couple days worth of food or give them some water or some tools that will help them get through the situation, or maybe give them a start somehow, that's probably going to make us feel better and be a good thing. So I think in the Bible it says tithe 10%, whatever works for you, but have a little set aside for that. However, using the broader term neighbors, meaning people around us, other people we encounter, we probably need to think about some very tactical preparations. Now, some people watching this probably live in an apartment, some people live in a house, whatever. The point is, you don't want to have a shed out back that says Matt's Big Giant Prepper Shed, or something like that. You don't want to advertise it, this thing is full of freeze-dried food, or it's full of bottled water, or whatever. Because you're basically just telling everybody around you that doesn't have those things where to go. We need to think practically. If we're going to bug out to a location in BFE somewhere, that's not a bad thing. You may want to consolidate your preps, but even then, you're still going to want to hide some around. I mean, if you have everything in one basket and somebody finds it and takes it when you're gone, it's gone. So consider whether you live in a house, having some things hidden in different rooms, behind a picture, something like that. But spread your stuff out. If you find yourself in a position where you have to give them up to somebody, usually via force, fine. They can have the preps that are in this pantry if they don't necessarily know about the ones I've got hidden in the floor or something. File that away, because no matter what, you need to diversify where your stashes are. A lot of people that I know who prep don't do that. Don't put all your ammunition and guns in one spot. Have them spread out to where if you lose a portion, you haven't lost them all. You probably also want to have a bug out plan. No place on the face of the earth is going to be stable forever. So have somewhere to go in a crunch and a way to pack up your stuff and take it with you. That's probably a really good idea. Not everybody can have a true bug out plan, but consider it. You also want to have multiple places to go. Now, I may say, hey, there's a place 20 miles outside of town, I've got deer on it, whatever, I can go hide there. But it doesn't mean, who knows, something can happen, a flood, a storm comes through and ruins that particular piece of property and you're screwed. Have some backups. I know not everybody can buy 15 different properties, but you can make arrangements with friends. Where we are, there are a lot of people that have farms, but they rely on heavy equipment for it. So if one bug out location went, we can make a deal with somebody else that, hey, we can provide labor and some other things and bring some foods with us. If in exchange you let us hole up on your property, and we'll help you out with it. There are some ways to do this via networking. And if you're with a prepper group of several people who can each do it, you can have yourself a network of locations to go to in a very bad crunch. So consider multiple backup locations. I mean, plan it out ahead of time. Don't just pull this out of your butt when it comes up. But have those locations to go to. You need to be able to defend yourself. I know every prepper out here likes to do all the videos about guns. It's not just guns. I'd pick up some martial arts Archery is a good thing because that's a silent way to do some damage. I don't care if you have aspetons and pepper spray. Have some realistic method to defend the things that you have. We see this with the aftermath of a lot of hurricanes where theft and robbery and that sort of thing goes up. Because when people need something they get desperate, they will take it from somebody else. So factor that in. Defense is going to be an important thing. What you decide to do with it is up to you, but do consider defense. You also want to be stealthy. Don't advertise all of your stuff. You want to make sure that you're not putting an ad in the paper. Yes, I do videos. However, I don't record them where I keep my preps. I don't tell everybody my address. I'm not like, hey, come over here. Spur's a small town, but good luck finding me. So, even with that, my bug out locations aren't across the street. They're hard to find. Where I stash and store things are also hard to find. And that is important. You want to make sure that the people who might want to take yours or rely on you can't get it. Part of that means not just telling everybody what you have, not running around to all your friends and coworkers, oh, I'm a prepper. I have 2 years worth of food in a Connex in my backyard. They'll remember that when the time comes. Another thing you want to do is not assume that your preps are material goods. I'll tell you one of the things we're going to do here in West Texas if something hits the fan is, and I can say this because a lot of people in West Texas would copy me and it would still work. We're going to live off prickly pear. Not solely, but where we are, there is a butt ton of it. It is all over the place. It grows in fence lines. It grows in fields. It grows on the side of hills. I don't know how the hell it grows where it does, but it's everywhere. It is edible. With a small amount of flour, you can fry it up. It's not my favorite thing to eat, but it does have nutrition. We have some knowledge of different plants that grow in this arid area, but that is one of the things. There's enough around here to sustain people for a long time. And again, it's not the ideal food source, but it's better than another food source. I use prickly pear as an example because knowledge of edible plants and the ability to harvest it in such a way that you can cook it, prepare it, whatever, is a skill. Now, I can't put 2 years worth of food in a backpack and hike off into the woods. I'm limited to a few days. So if I'm going to survive somewhere else, I need to rely on skills. I need to be able to take food that nature provides and make it edible for me and mine. And something that I learned in the Boy Scouts, nobody can pack everything they need, but you can put a whole lot of information in your head. That's why you hear me talk so much about prepper libraries or skills or knowledge, because at the end of the day, no matter how many guns you have or how much ammo you have, you're limited on what you can carry. At the end of the day, knowledge is going to be true power. If, I don't know, solar flare hit the earth and fried everything that's electronic, the people who are going to prosper are the people who can rebuild it. If a massive, I don't know, asteroid hit like that one in Russia and blitzed a whole bunch of stuff in North America or something, only a bigger one, or whatever else, pick your poison, pick your natural disaster that is more than just a town, I mean hugely regional or nation or worldwide. The people who have skills to rebuild that. Now we can rebuild after a hurricane or a tornado, but on a larger scale it's tougher. The people who have the skills to rebuild, who have the skills to get the food, the water, the medicine, the basic necessities to survive such an event, are going to be the people who not just survive, but they prosper. And at the end of the day, we can't all just hide all of our stuff somewhere. We can't have bunkers everywhere. We're not all Bill Gates or whoever. We're going to have to, at some point, the preps will run out. We are going to have to be in a situation where we can use the knowledge that's in our head to bring more survivability. I mean, once upon a time, people would walk from Boston to San Francisco with little more than what was in a backpack and a horse. And they managed to live doing it. I mean, the Oregon Trail. This entire continent of North America was conquered by people who were able to not just live but thrive in harsh environments with very little more than they could fit in a wagon, and they had to fight Indians and grizzly bears and all kinds of other crap doing it. It was a tough life, but it was possible. And in doing so, they created a continent that thrives like none other. Anyway, these are things you have to do ahead of time. You can't sit around and be like, all right, when SHTF happens, well, and I'm going to get my shotgun and I'm going to get all tactical on them. You need to train ahead of time. Well, I'll go out in the woods and I'll live off plants. Well, what kind of plants are out there? I don't know. I'll find out. You need to learn this stuff ahead of time. All of these preps, the stealthiness, the defense, the knowing how to relate to it, building information on neighbors, the community, the people around you. This stuff needs to be done on a day-to-day basis. You need to know this ahead of time, because when shit hits the fan, it's not going to be something marked on your calendar. You're not going to get a text saying, hey, next Thursday a solar flare is going to hit the earth and fry everything. Or a civil war is going to break out in Canada and it's going to spill over to Montana and cause all kinds of other stuff to go wrong. This stuff isn't scheduled ahead of time. You need to be prepared for when it surprises you, not for when you want it to occur. Anyway, those are kind of my thoughts on how to deal with neighbors. Just remember, when words are important. So when you hear the word neighbor, don't think people next to you. Think people in the community around you. Think a little bit broader when doing this. Also consider to yourself, it is cool right now making videos to sound tough and be like, well, if somebody tries to steal my preps, I'm going to shoot all of them. Are you really? Are you going to shoot the guy who's trying to steal some bottled water and some ramen noodles from you because he's got 3 hungry kids in the car? Are you going to smoke him? Probably not. It's no good to have these preps and to have the ability to survive a bad situation if we can't maintain our humanity doing it. To be honest, I don't want to live in a Mad Max world where everybody's crazy and killing each other with shotguns and machetes. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. I like society. I like humanity. I like the fact that the people around me aren't crazy. It's important that if we are going to prep, we can maintain our civility, our humanity, to as great a point possible doing it. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts on dealing with neighbors. We put those into practice where we are. All of them. We learn new skills every day. We try to make sure that if something bad is to happen, we are as prepared as we can be within our financial and time-constrained abilities. It's not perfect, but it'll have to do. You don't necessarily, as Donald Rumsfeld once said, you don't go to the army, don't go to war with the army you have, you go to war with the one you've got. It's our responsibility when times are good to make sure our preps, that we don't go into SHTF with the preps we want. We have to make sure the preps we have are as close to what we want as possible within our constraints. Anyway, those are kind of my thoughts on it. For those of y'all who want to see what realistic threats are out there, because I don't think the world's going to go to Mad Max overnight, you probably want to look at how things have happened after natural disasters. We had different issues in Houston after Harvey than, say, New Orleans had after Katrina, or the Bahamas are having now. You want to look at some of that, and so you can kind of assess threats ahead of time. You also probably want to make yourself knowledgeable in how people survived the Great Depression. Nobody expected the stock market to collapse when it did, or at least the average person didn't. So how did the people who were alive then manage to survive it, and indeed keep a country together well enough that when World War II started, we could beat the crap out of 2 major superpowers on different continents? It's all been done. This has all been done before. The grids have gone down. FIT has hit the shan more than once. Let's look at some historical precedent for this so we know how neighbors reacted with each other, so we know how communities and societies were able to react and thrive. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much food or how many rounds of ammunition or whatever you have, at the end of the day, knowledge and information is what will sustain us. And that's why I harp on it so much. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on how to deal with neighbors and people around you. Shoot me a comment, give me some thoughts on what you think. Like I say, the purpose of these videos is to get a conversation going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell thing, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.